It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Oakwood Hills. This was a small, quiet neighborhood where everybody thought they knew everybody. The houses were neat, the lawns were green, and the streets were calm. Kids rode bikes, dogs barked, and people waved hello. It felt like a happy little world, but something was about to shake things up, something big. Let me tell you about Jake Miller. Jake was a new guy in town. He just moved into a little house on Maple Street. He was young, maybe in his 20s, with messy brown hair and a friendly smile. Jake didn't talk much. He liked to keep to himself. Most days you'd find him sitting on his porch steps, sipping a cold glass of lemonade. He'd lean back, watch the clouds, and enjoy the breeze. Nothing fancy, right? Just a guy and his drink. Now, Jake's house wasn't perfect. His porch steps were a little wobbly and his front yard wasn't always tidy. His grass grew a bit too long sometimes, and his old truck sat in the driveway with rust spots on the sides. It wasn't shiny or new like the other cars on the street, but Jake didn't seem to care. He was happy just sitting there minding his own business. Now, most people in Oakwood Hills didn't mind Jake. Some waved at him when they walked by. Others didn't even notice him. But one person did. One person couldn't stand him, and that person was Linda Harper. Linda was the boss of the neighborhood, or at least she acted like it. Everyone called her the HOA Queen. HOA stands for Homeowners Association, a group that makes rules to keep the neighborhood nice. Linda loved those rules more than anything. She carried a clipboard everywhere she went, writing down notes about people's houses. If your mailbox was crooked or your flowers weren't pretty enough, Linda would know. And she'd tell you about it, too. Linda was older, with sharp eyes and a loud voice. She wore bright clothes and big hats like she wanted everyone to see her coming. She walked up and down the streets every day, checking on things. If something wasn't perfect, she'd frown and shake her head. To her, Oakwood Hills had to be the best neighborhood ever, and she was the one to make sure it stayed that way. So when Jake moved in, Linda noticed him right away. She didn't like what she saw. His rusty truck, ugly, his long grass, a mess, and those porch steps he sat on all the time. Oh, they drove her crazy. To Linda, Jake didn't fit in. He didn't follow her idea of a perfect neighbor. He wasn't like the other people who mowed their lawns every Saturday and kept their houses spotless. Jake was different, and Linda didn't like different. The first time Linda saw Jake, she stopped in front of his house. She stood there with her clipboard staring at him. Jake was on his steps, holding his lemonade. He looked up and gave her a little wave. "Hey," he said, nice and easy. But Linda didn't wave back. She just squinted at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't figure out. Then she wrote something on her clipboard and marched away. Jake shrugged and took another sip. He didn't know it yet, but Linda had already decided he was trouble. The days went by and Linda kept watching Jake. Every time she passed his house, she'd slow down. She'd look at his truck, his grass, his steps. She'd mutter to herself, "This won't do, not in my neighborhood." Jake didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did, but he didn't care. He just kept sitting there, enjoying his quiet afternoons. One day, Linda got bold. She walked right up to Jake's yard while he was on his steps. She stood there, hands on her hips, and said, "You know, young man, this isn't how we do things here." Her voice was loud, like she wanted the whole street to hear. Jake looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" he asked. Linda pointed at his truck. "That thing is an eyesore, and your grass, it's a jungle. We have rules in Oakwood Hills. You need to follow them." She tapped her clipboard with her pen like it was a magic wand. Jake tilted his head. "Rules, huh? I'll think about it," he said, calm as ever. Then he smiled and went back to his lemonade. Linda's face turned pink. She wasn't used to people ignoring her. Most folks in the neighborhood listened when she talked. They'd nod and say, "Yes, Linda," and fix whatever she complained about. But Jake, he didn't jump up to mow his lawn or paint his truck. He just sat there, sipping away. It made Linda mad, really mad. From that day on, Linda had her eye on Jake. She watched him like a hawk. Every time he stepped outside, she was there, peeking from her window or walking by with her clipboard. She started telling the neighbors about him, too. "That new guy doesn't belong here," she'd say. "He's ruining our street." Some people agreed with her. Others just shrugged. But Linda didn't care what they thought. She was on a mission. Jake, though, he didn't seem worried. He kept doing his thing, sitting on those steps, drinking his lemonade and watching the world go by. He'd wave at kids on their bikes or nod at old Mr. Thompson walking his dog. He was friendly but quiet. Nobody knew much about him. Where did he come from? Why did he move here? What did he do all day? Nobody asked, and Jake didn't tell. But here's the thing, Jake wasn't just some random guy. There was more to him than anyone knew, especially Linda. She thought he was lazy, maybe even a troublemaker. She thought he didn't care about her rules because he was rude or sloppy. But Jake had a secret, a big one, and it was going to change everything. Linda didn't see it coming. She was too busy planning her next move. She wanted Jake gone, or at least she wanted him to shape up. She started writing him letters. "Dear Mr. Miller," they'd say, "your yard is not up to HOA standards. Fix it or you'll get a fine." Jake would find these notes in his mailbox, read them, and toss them in the trash. He didn't argue. He didn't fight. He just kept sitting on his steps like nothing was wrong. That made Linda even angrier. She wasn't used to losing. In her mind, she was the queen of Oakwood Hills, and Jake was a problem she had to fix. She started thinking of bigger ways to get him in line. Maybe she'd call a meeting with the HOA. Maybe she'd tell everyone he was breaking the rules, or maybe, just maybe, she'd do something even crazier. What do you think Linda's about to do? She's got her clipboard, her rules, and a plan. She thinks she's in charge. But Jake, he's got something up his sleeve too, something she'd never guess in a million years. This story's just getting started, and trust me, it's going to get good. Stick around, because you won't believe what happens next. Linda Harper wasn't the kind of person who waited around. Nope, she was fast, super fast, when it came to fixing things she didn't like. And what she didn't like most right now, Jake Miller, that new guy with his rusty truck and messy grass, was driving her nuts. But the worst part, those porch steps. Oh, those steps made her so mad she could scream. Every single day, Linda marched past Jake's house. She'd put on her big hat, grab her clipboard, and stomp down the sidewalk like she was the boss of everything. When she got to Jake's place, she'd stop and stare. Her eyes would lock onto those porch steps like they were the ugliest things she'd ever seen. They were old, a little wobbly, and Jake loved sitting on them with his lemonade. To Linda, that was a crime, a big, awful crime. Those steps are an eyesore, she'd yell loud enough for the whole block to hear. Her voice would bounce off the houses, sharp and angry. This is a respectable neighborhood. We don't do things like that here. She'd wave her arms, her clipboard flapping in the wind. Everyone knew Linda meant business when she talked like that. But Jake, he didn't even blink. He'd just sit there on his steps, holding his cold lemonade and smile. A little easy smile like he didn't have a care in the world. Then he'd wave at her nice and slow. "Hey Linda," he'd say, all calm and friendly. That wave, that smile, oh, it made Linda madder than a wet cat. She hated how he didn't jump up or argue. He didn't even look scared. One sunny afternoon, Linda decided she'd had enough. She couldn't take it anymore. Jake was sitting there, same as always, sipping his drink. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and everything seemed peaceful except for Linda. She marched right up to his yard, her shoes clicking on the sidewalk. She stopped in front of him, so close he could see the fire in her eyes. "You think you're above the rules, huh?" she barked. Her voice was loud and mean, like a dog growling at a stranger. She pointed a finger right at Jake's face, shaking it like she was scolding a kid. "I've told you 100 times, this neighborhood has standards. You can't just sit there like you own the place." Now Jake looked up at her, still holding his glass. His eyes were calm, like a still pond. He didn't yell back. He didn't even stand up. He just tilted his head a little and said, "Rules, huh? Okay, Linda, do what you gotta do." Then he shrugged like it was no big deal and took another sip of his lemonade. Linda's face turned red, bright red like a tomato. She wasn't used to this. When she told people to fix their yards or paint their fences, they listened. They'd say, "Yes, Linda," and get to work. But Jake, he didn't budge. He didn't care. That shrug, that little "do what you gotta do," it was like a slap in her face. She stood there, breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists. "I'll have you fined," she snapped, "or worse, you'll see." She shook her finger one more time, then turned around and stormed off. Her big hat bounced as she went, and she muttered under her breath the whole way. "I'll teach him a lesson," she grumbled. "He won't laugh at me for long." Now Jake watched her go. He didn't say a word. He just leaned back on his steps, took a long sip, and let the sun warm his face. If you saw him, you'd think nothing happened. He looked so relaxed, like Linda's big fit was just a breeze passing by. But Linda, oh, she was already planning her next move. She wasn't done with Jake, not even close. See, Linda thought she knew everything about everybody. She lived in Oakwood Hills forever. She knew who had the prettiest flowers, who forgot to take out their trash, and who needed a talking to. She kept the neighborhood perfect, or so she thought. To her, Jake was a problem. A big, messy problem. His truck was rusty, his grass was wild, and those steps, they broke every rule in her book. But here's the thing Linda didn't know. Jake wasn't just some random guy. Nope. He wasn't lazy or rude or sloppy like she thought. He had a secret, a huge one. And that secret, it was going to flip her whole world upside down. She had no idea what was coming, none at all. While Linda was stomping away, Jake stayed cool. He didn't yell after her or chase her down. He didn't even look mad. He just sat there sipping away like he had all the time in the world. But if you looked close, really close, you might see a tiny sparkle in his eyes, like he knew something Linda didn't, like he was waiting for something big. The next day, Linda was back at it. She walked by Jake's house again, her clipboard ready. She glared at those steps, then at Jake. He was there, same as always, with his lemonade. "You're still here," she said, her voice sharp like a knife. "I told you to fix this mess." Jake smiled again. "Yep, still here," he said. "Nice day, huh?" Linda huffed. "Nice day. This isn't about the weather, this is about rules." She scribbled something on her clipboard, her pen moving fast. "I'm warning you, Jake, you're going to regret this." Then she turned and marched off again, her head held high. She thought she was winning. She thought she had him scared. But Jake, he wasn't scared, not one bit. He watched her go, his smile never fading. He took another sip and leaned back. The neighbors started to notice, too. Old Mr. Thompson walked by with his dog and chuckled. "She's got it out for you, huh?" he said. Jake nodded. "Guess so," he replied. "She'll tire herself out eventually." Mr. Thompson laughed and kept walking, but Linda didn't tire out, not yet. She kept coming back day after day. Sometimes she'd yell, sometimes she'd just stare. One time she even took a picture of Jake's steps with her phone. "Evidence," she said, waving the phone at him. Jake waved back. "Nice camera," he said. That made her so mad she almost dropped it. The tension was growing, you could feel it in the air. Linda was like a storm cloud, getting darker and louder every day. She wanted Jake to fight back or give in. She wanted him to mow his grass, fix his truck, and get rid of those steps. But Jake wouldn't budge. He just kept sitting there, calm and quiet, like a rock in a river. The neighbors started whispering. "What's Linda going to do?" they'd ask each other. "She's really mad this time." Some thought Jake should listen to her. "He's new," they'd say. "He should follow the rules." Others liked Jake. "He's not hurting anyone," they'd argue. "Let him be." But Linda didn't care what anyone thought. She was on a mission, and Jake was her target. Every time she yelled, Jake stayed cool. Every time she pointed, he shrugged. It was like a game, one Linda thought she could win. She didn't know Jake was playing a different game, a bigger one. She thought he was just a guy with a messy yard. She thought he was nobody special. But she was wrong, so wrong. What Linda didn't see, what she couldn't see, was that Jake had something up his sleeve. He wasn't afraid of her rules or her clipboard or her big, loud voice. He had a secret, and it was waiting, quiet and strong, like a surprise party no one expects. Linda kept pushing, thinking she was in charge. But soon, very soon, she'd find out the truth. And when she did, oh, it was going to be wild. Days went by in Oakwood Hills, and things started heating up. Linda Harper wasn't slowing down, not one bit. She was like a bee buzzing around, getting louder and bossier every day. She decided Jake Miller was her big problem, and she wasn't going to let him off easy. Nope, Linda was getting bolder, and she had a plan to make Jake wish he'd never moved in. Every morning, Linda grabbed her clipboard and her phone. She'd march down the street, her big hat bouncing, and stop right in front of Jake's house. She'd glare at his porch steps, those wobbly old steps Jake loved so much. Then she'd pull out her phone and snap pictures. Click, click, click. She'd take shot after shot, zooming in on the rusty truck, the long grass, and those steps. "This is proof," she'd mutter to herself, her lips tight. "He can't hide from this." After taking pictures, she'd scribble notes on her clipboard. She'd write fast, her pen scratching the paper like an angry chicken. "Steps ugly, grass too tall, truck a mess," she'd write. She wanted a list of everything Jake was doing wrong. To her, he was breaking all the rules of Oakwood Hills, and she was going to make him pay. But Linda didn't stop there. Oh no, she started knocking on neighbors' doors too. She'd bang on them hard, then wait with her hands on her hips. When someone answered, she'd start complaining right away. "Jake Miller is ruining our property values," she'd whine, her voice high and squeaky. "Look at his house, it's a disaster, we can't let this go on." The neighbors didn't know what to say. Most of them were scared of Linda. She was loud and pushy, and nobody wanted to argue with her. So they'd nod along, their heads bobbing like little toys. Sure, Linda," they'd mumble, "you're right." They didn't really care about Jake's steps or his grass, but they didn't want Linda mad at them. She was like a storm, better to stay out of her way. Meanwhile, Jake, he didn't seem bothered at all. Every day he'd sit on his porch steps with his lemonade. The sun would shine, the birds would sing, and Jake would just lean back, watching everything. When Linda walked by, snapping her pictures or yelling about rules, he'd look at her. And then, get this, he'd smirk. A little tiny smirk, like he thought it was funny. That smirk drove Linda wild. One afternoon, something new happened. A delivery guy pulled up in a big brown truck. He hopped out, carrying a package, and walked right up to Jake's door. Jake wasn't outside at that moment. He'd gone in to grab more lemonade. The delivery guy set the box down on the porch steps and drove off. Linda saw the whole thing. She was standing across the street, pretending to check her mailbox, but really she was spying. As soon as the truck left, she hurried over. She couldn't help herself, she was nosy as ever. She tiptoed up to Jake's porch and peeked at the package. The label said J. Miller in big letters. Under that, there was some fancy name, a department or company Linda didn't know. It looked important, but she didn't get it. Linda huffed. "Probably some cheap junk," she said to herself, crossing her arms. "He's just pretending to be special." She didn't want to believe Jake could have anything nice. To her, he was a lazy guy with a messy yard, nothing more, but something about that package stuck in her head. It bugged her like an itch she couldn't scratch. Why did it look so official? Why wasn't it just a regular box? No, she stood there staring at it until Jake came back outside. He stepped onto the porch, saw the package, and picked it up. Then he noticed Linda standing there watching him. "Hey Linda," he said, that smirk on his face again. "Nice day, huh?" He didn't even mention the package, just tucked it under his arm and sat back down with his lemonade. Linda's eyes narrowed. "What's in that box?" she asked, her voice sharp. Jake shrugged. "Just some stuff," he said, all casual. "Nothing big." Linda didn't believe him. She wanted to know, needed to know, but Jake wasn't giving her anything. She huffed again, louder this time, and stomped off. That package stayed in her mind all day. She kept thinking about it. Why was Jake so calm? Why didn't he care about her pictures or her notes or her complaints? Most people would get mad or nervous if Linda came after them. They'd try to fix things fast. But Jake, he just sat there smirking like he was waiting for something. It didn't make sense to her. The next day, Linda got even nosier. She started asking the neighbors about Jake. "Have you seen that guy?" she'd say, pointing at his house. "He's trouble. Did you see that package he got? Probably something shady." The neighbors didn't know what to think. Some shrugged. "He seems nice," they'd say. Others nodded with Linda. "Yeah, maybe he's up to no good," they'd whisper. Linda loved that they were finally listening to her. But Jake didn't change. He kept sitting on his steps day after day. When Linda walked by, he'd wave. When she took pictures, he'd smirk. When she yelled, he'd sip his lemonade. It was like nothing could shake him, and that made Linda madder than ever. She started thinking bigger. "I'll show him," she'd mutter. "I'll make him sorry he ever moved here." One morning, Linda tried something new. She brought a measuring tape. She marched up to Jake's yard while he was inside and started measuring his grass. "Too tall," she said, writing it down. Then she measured his steps. "Too wobbly," she added. Jake came out and saw her. "What's up, Linda?" he asked, leaning against the door. Linda stood up straight. "I'm documenting everything," she said, waving her tape measure. "You're breaking every rule in the book." Jake chuckled, a little laugh, soft and easy. "Okay," he said, "have fun with that." Then he sat down with his drink, watching her like she was putting on a show. Linda's face turned pink. She hated that laugh. She hated how he didn't care. She stuffed her tape measure in her pocket and stormed off, her clipboard flapping. "You'll see," she called over her shoulder. "This isn't over." Jake just waved, that smirk still on his lips. The neighbors started talking more. "Linda's really mad now," they'd say. "What's she going to do?" Some thought she'd call the HOA and get Jake fined. Others thought she'd give up. But Linda wasn't giving up, not yet. She was digging in deeper, like a dog with a bone. She kept snapping pictures, knocking on doors, and writing notes. She even started a list of Jake's crimes to show everyone. But here's the thing, every step Linda took was making her own trouble bigger. She didn't know it yet, but she was walking right into something she couldn't control. That package, it wasn't junk. It was a clue, a tiny hint about who Jake really was. And Jake, he wasn't worried. He wasn't scared. He was watching her, waiting like a cat with a mouse. Linda thought she was winning. She thought Jake was just a lazy guy she could boss around. But she was wrong. Every picture she took, every note she wrote, every door she knocked on, it was all building up to something huge. Something she'd never guess. Jake's little smirk, his calm voice, they weren't accidents. They were signs, signs Linda didn't see. The days kept going and the tension grew. Linda got louder. Jake stayed quiet. The neighbors watched, whispering to each other. Everyone could feel it. Something big was coming. Linda was sure she'd get Jake in trouble. But Jake, he knew something she didn't. And soon, very soon, that secret was going to come out. Then came the big day, the day everything changed in Oakwood Hills. Linda Harper had been mad for weeks. She yelled at Jake, taken pictures, knocked on doors, and written notes. Now, she'd done everything she could think of to make Jake follow her rules, but he didn't. He just sat on his porch steps, sipping lemonade, smirking at her, and Linda, she'd had enough. She was done waiting. She was ready to win once and for all. It was a bright, sunny morning. The sky was blue, the birds were chirping, and the neighborhood was quiet. Linda stood in her front yard, her big hat on and her phone in her hand. She looked across the street at Jake's house. There he was, same as always, sitting on those wobbly steps with his cold drink. That sight, the steps, the lemonade, the smirk, it made her blood boil. No more, she said to herself. This ends today. Linda took a deep breath. She held up her phone, her fingers shaking a little from how mad she was. She dialed 911. Yep, the police. She pressed the phone to her ear and waited. When the operator answered, Linda didn't waste a second. "There's a suspicious man on my street," she cried, her voice loud and high. "He's loitering on his porch steps, refusing to follow HOA rules. I singhala si wa news." She kept going, talking fast. "I don't feel safe. He's been here for weeks, just sitting there doing nothing. I need help." Linda smirked as she hung up. She crossed her arms and stood in her yard, staring at Jake. She thought she'd finally won. In her mind, the police would come see Jake and take him away. She could almost picture it, him in the back of a cop car, those awful steps empty at last. "Good riddance," she muttered, a little smile on her face. Minutes ticked by. Linda waited, tapping her foot. She kept her eyes on Jake, who didn't move. He just sat there, calm as ever, sipping his lemonade. That made her even madder. Why isn't he scared? She thought. He should be worried. But Jake wasn't worried.